On June 4th, 1943, at the sprawling Norfolk Naval Base in Virginia, Unaphizer Herman Butcher, his legs still finding purchase after 14 days traversing the volatile North Atlantic, gripped the ship's railing and descended the gangplank. Emerging through the humid morning haze, he encountered a spectacle that instantly shattered 3 years of carefully constructed Nazi propaganda. Before him, American dock workers, both white and black, operated seamlessly side by side, maneuvering machinery that seemed to belong to a future century. Women, clad in practical coveralls, expertly managed towering cranes, while children hawked newspapers near the military gates. Crucially, no one scattered or showed alarm at the sight of the enemy uniform. "Die spinnin', die Americaner," he muttered to the man behind him. "The Americans are crazy." This immediate ideological shock would later form the core of Butcher's memoir, Behind Barbed Wire, published in Germany in 1952, one of the most detailed primary accounts of prisoner of war life in the United States. The sheer scale of the Norfolk base, encompassing 4,300 acres with docks stretching beyond the horizon, was overwhelming. Its powerful cranes loaded and unloaded dozens of vessels simultaneously. In a single morning, this one port handled tonnage that vastly exceeded Hamburg's weekly logistical capacity. Yet, the arriving German prisoners were not merely stunned by the industrial magnitude. What truly unnerved them was a pervasive sense of domestic normality. Civilians moved freely near critical military installations. Vendors sold hot coffee and donuts within sight of massive warships. A brass band played popular music at a nearby war bond rally. Here, standing in formation on American soil, were 2,500 veterans of Rommel's legendary Afrika Korps, the vanguard of what would become 425,000 German prisoners held in the United States by the war's conclusion. What these men would witness in the months ahead transcended mere American abundance, a story often recounted. They would observe something far more corrosive to the rigid military mind, a nation prosecuting a global war that fundamentally refused to embrace the austerity or paranoia of total war. This was a society so utterly secure in its logistical and military power that it treated mortal enemies less like invaders and more like errant house guests. These strange customs and inexplicable civilian behaviors would ultimately prove more destructive to the core tenets of Nazi ideology than any singular battlefield defeat. The processing at Norfolk began with what Butcher termed in his memoir, the first impossibility. German military doctrine, rigorously applied from Poland to France to North Africa, dictated that prisoners were either valuable assets to be exploited or troublesome burdens to be minimized. The Geneva Convention was acknowledged. The operational shift was immediate and profound. While the Geneva Conventions were often treated by belligerents as aspirational guidelines, conveniently observed when expedient, yet ignored in the crucible of battle, here, American officers meticulously read the regulations aloud in fluent German, explaining fundamental rights and inquiring about specific dietary needs. This adherence was underscored by an extraordinary scene documented in International Red Cross records from June 1943. Jewish American personnel, notably several sergeants with distinctly Semitic surnames, were tasked with distributing essential Red Cross packages. They explained that rigorously kosher meals were readily available for any Jewish prisoners of war. Several Wehrmacht soldiers reacted with nervous laughter, interpreting the offer as cruel mockery, yet it was entirely genuine. The American military had prepared for the religious and dietary requirements of their enemies. Even the medical inspections defied conventional military logic. German prisoners received the same stocks of penicillin, that miracle drug, scarcely available even in German field hospitals, as their American counterparts. Swiss Red Cross Inspector Guy Matro noted in his July 1943 report, "Medical treatment provided to German POWs equals or demonstrably exceeds that given to American military personnel. Prisoners consistently expressed shock and disbelief at the quality of care. The institutional contrast extended to personnel. African-American medical staff served in integrated units at installations like Norfolk, even though segregation persisted throughout the wider military structure. One documented instance involved a Negro medical technician who routinely drew blood from captured Wehrmacht officers for standard health screening, a type of racial contact that was legally forbidden and punishable by death under the Nuremberg laws. Here, It was simply military routine. Perhaps the most incomprehensible spectacle occurred during the first meal. German prisoners were escorted into a mess hall where American sailors were already seated. These two groups, mortal enemies who had recently been locked in deadly convoy battles, ate in the same facility, separated only by 50 feet of floor space. They shared the same food lines and the same quality meals. The Americans showed little interest, their attention consumed by a radio broadcast of a baseball game rather than the presence of their defeated adversaries. The 3-day train journey to inland camps provided the next level of cognitive dissonance. Unlike the secretive movement of prisoners practiced in Germany, American authorities made no attempt to conceal the transit of the POWs. The trains used were not degrading boxcars, but actual passenger coaches equipped with cushioned seating. They stopped at regular stations, allowing hundreds of civilians to gather and observe. At Union Station in Washington, D.C., this procession was witnessed by hundreds and meticulously documented in station logs from June 1943. German prisoners of war, transported across the continent, were granted an unprecedented view of the American home front. From the train windows, they witnessed scenes of domestic tranquility and startling informality. Wives publicly embracing husbands destined for training camps, children waving flags, and teenagers sharing milkshakes at bustling station restaurants. Enemies and families occupied the very same platforms, separated only by glass, and guards whose attention appeared fixed more on directing rail traffic than on securing the captured soldiers. The journey revealed the astonishing scale of American industrial mobilization. The trains traversed vast industrial complexes that, by European standards, should have been meticulously camouflaged and protected. Instead, colossal factories openly displayed their names in huge letters. At the Glen L. Martin Aircraft Plant in Baltimore, parking lots filled with the personal automobiles of workers were plainly visible from the tracks. Prisoners were able to systematically count to be 26 bombers lined up for immediate delivery. This was not a nation operating under the shadow of fear or security paranoia, but an industrial behemoth functioning in plain sight of its enemies. As the trains cut through Pennsylvania, they passed ceaseless coal mines and steel mills. The night sky above these complexes glowed in incandescent orange, fueled by blast furnaces running continuous shifts. Surrounding these industrial hubs were miles of workers' housing, individual homes, often featuring small gardens rather than the expected communal barracks. Every window glowed with electric light, and radio antennas sprouted from every roof. This display of widespread prosperity culminated during a stop in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, an event documented in Pennsylvania railroad records. German officers observed American workers during a shift change, men equipped with leather shoes, wristwatches, and driving personal vehicles. Butcher's memoir recounts one particularly jarring moment. A laborer casually discarded a half-eaten apple, immediately opening a fresh one from his lunchbox. This casual waste of food by a working man deeply stunned the officers, many of whom had witnessed their own troops fighting over meager scraps during the North Africa campaign. Their eventual destination was Camp Hearn, Texas, which officially opened in December 1942. Situated on 720 acres near the town of Hearn in Robertson County, military records confirm the facility was designed to house up to 4,800 German prisoners in conditions that frequently exceeded the standards many had known as civilians. The entire construction and operation of the camp are thoroughly documented in Army Corps of Engineers records and War Department files preserved at the National Archives. The very infrastructure of Camp Hearn presented a profound challenge to the German understanding of prisoner treatment. Wooden barracks illuminated by electric lights, not oil lamps. Indoor plumbing featuring flush toilets and hot water heaters in every structure, and individual beds complete with mattresses, sheets, and blankets, replacing the expected straw pallets. Furthermore, recreation halls were equipped with amenities, such as ping-pong tables. The reality of Camp Hearn defied wartime expectations, becoming a remarkable exception to standard POW treatment. In his August 1943 report, Swiss inspector Emil Sandstrom documented facilities that were startlingly comfortable, noting that conditions at Camp Hearn exceed not only Geneva Convention requirements, but surpass living conditions many of these men knew in Germany. The camp commander, Lieutenant Colonel Cecile Stiles, whose detailed service record is meticulously preserved in military archives, initiated this radical approach, addressing the arriving enemies in fluent German, a language he had mastered during his university studies before the conflict. Stiles explained the camp rules, but then announced a truly unprecedented policy. The prisoners would largely govern themselves within the confines of the compounds. They retained the right to elect spokesmen, organize internal activities, and manage their daily schedules, subject only to military oversight. This delegation of authority to enemy combatants seemed, to many observers, to signal either severe weakness or a complex trap. The medical facilities further underscored the camp's exceptional standards. Inspected monthly by the International Red Cross, the camp hospital contained advanced equipment that many German civilian hospitals conspicuously lacked. It housed X-ray machines, fully equipped surgical suites, modern dental chairs, and extensive pharmaceutical stocks, including supplies of the new, life-saving wonder drug, penicillin. This commitment to care was tested in September 1943, when prisoner Georg Gartner, who would later achieve notoriety as the last German POW to formally surrender in 1985, developed acute appendicitis. Within hours, Gartner was on the operating table, receiving complex surgery performed by Captain William Calhoun, an Army surgeon from Dallas, assisted by German POW medical staff. Yet, nothing prepared the prisoners for the camp canteen. This authorized store allowed them to purchase goods with scrip earned from voluntary labor. The inventory was broad: cigarettes, chocolate, soap, writing materials, musical instruments, and art supplies. Quartermaster Corps records document the War Department's authorization for these sales, driven by the pragmatic belief that small comforts would maintain prisoner morale and significantly reduce escape attempts. The very concept that enemy prisoners could shop, choose purchases, and possess amenities considered luxuries beyond mere survival utterly scrambled conventional military thinking. By September 1943, the severe wartime labor shortages necessitated the widespread employment of prisoners throughout Texas. The War Manpower Commission, acting in coordination with the Provost Marshal General's office, formally authorized the use of prisoner labor in agriculture and non-military industries. For this work, prisoners earned 80 cents per day in canteen scrip, the same base pay rate afforded to American privates. Detailed records of these extensive work programs survive in the official archives. Drawing directly from National Archives Record Group 389, the experience of German prisoners of war in Texas offered profound, immediate confrontation with the overwhelming scale of American industrial agriculture. Nowhere was this observation more acute than at the King Ranch near Kingsville, a vast enterprise covering 825,000 acres, an expanse greater than the entire state of Rhode Island. Ranch records spanning the period of 1943 to 1945 confirm that German prisoners worked directly alongside Mexican-American vaqueros and African-American ranch hands in cattle operations. This unavoidable racial mixing in the workplace, though socially constrained, fundamentally challenged the rigid, destructive racial hierarchies championed by the Nazi regime. Letters intercepted by military censors documented the prisoners' astonishment at the level of mechanization. They witnessed single combine harvesters accomplishing the work of dozens of men, while crops were transported exclusively by trucks rather than slow, horse-drawn wagons. The sheer modernity extended even to ranch management. The King Ranch utilized small civilian aircraft to survey massive cattle herds and spot strays. Furthermore, ranch employment records indicate that Foreman Richard Clayburgh Jr. deliberately treated the German PWs not as wartime enemies, but as necessary temporary employees. Throughout the Texas Cotton Belt, including documented operations in Taylor, Caldwell, and Waller counties, PWs were exposed to processing speeds unimaginable by European standards. The Hearn Cotton Oil Mill, which relied on POW labor from August 1943 to December 1945, routinely processed more raw cotton in a single day than German textile mills typically handled in an entire month. Yet, this intense productivity was achieved through a startlingly humane system. Workers took regular breaks, ate substantial lunches, and listened to radios while working. This emphasis on productivity through good treatment, rather than the harsh, unrelenting discipline of the Wehrmacht, was a profound cultural shock. Perhaps the most subversive lesson came from the open political discourse of American democracy. FBI monitoring reports declassified decades later in the 1970s, revealed that German PWs were genuinely shocked to hear American farmers freely criticizing President Roosevelt and openly complaining about government policies without any fear of repercussion. In a documented incident near Bryan, Texas, a farmer, embroiled in a crop allocation dispute, famously told a Department of Agriculture inspector to go to hell. The farmer faced no consequences, a defiant act that would have guaranteed summary execution in Nazi Germany. Local Texas newspapers, including the Hearn Democrat, the Bryan Daily Eagle, and the Temple Daily Telegram, provided contemporary documentation of these encounters. These articles, detailing PW work details and community interactions, verify the depth of social exposure that stunned the military prisoners. In December 1943, the Hearn Democrat reported German supervised Christmas shopping outings provided the German prisoners of war with a shocking immersion into American teenage culture. They observed young people congregating freely at drugstore soda fountains, boys and girls mingling without chaperones. They danced to the unrestrained sounds of jukebox music, including jazz and swing, genres that Nazi ideology had notoriously condemned as degenerate Negro music. The youth wore fashionable clothes, displaying a striking absence of militarization so common in Axis nations. Most profoundly, the conduct of American women challenged the prisoners' worldview. Women drove heavy trucks for the Hearn Cotton Oil Mill, operated independent businesses along Main Street, and supervised male laborers within critical defense plants. At the nearby Bryan Army Airfield, female pilots, part of the Women Air Force Service pilots, WASP program, flew military aircraft. Military records confirm WASPs operated visibly from Bryan Field between 1943 and 1944, often within sight of POW work details. This unexpected visibility extended to community life, as churches throughout Robertson County extended invitations to the German prisoners for services. Documentation from the First Baptist Church of Hearn, First Methodist Church, and St. Mary's Catholic Church confirms German POW attendance. The Hearn Democrat, reporting on December 24, 1943, noted the profound scene. German prisoners attended Christmas Eve services at multiple churches, sitting among congregation members whose sons serve overseas. No incidents reported. By early 1944, the Provost Marshal General's office had initiated sophisticated educational operations at Camp Hearn through its Special Projects Division. Declassified records from Record Group 389 reveal the meticulous extent of this secret re-education initiative, though prisoners were only informed of a voluntary education program. The camp library, which began with 500 books donated by Hearn citizens, expanded dramatically to over 5,000 volumes by August 1944. The American Library Association's Books for Prisoners program supplied vital texts, including works by German authors banned under the Nazi regime. Available volumes included Thomas Mann's A Magic Mountain, Erich Maria Remarque's All Quiet on the Western Front, and works by Jewish authors such as Lion Feuchtwanger, books whose mere possession in Nazi Germany would have been punishable by death. Furthermore, Sam Houston State Teachers College, now Sam Houston State University, provided correspondence courses. College records indicate that 340 German POWs enrolled in subjects like English, American history, mathematics, and agricultural science between 1944 and 1945, with professors from the college visiting the camp. The intellectual battleground of camps was often fought on the printed page. While Deruff was indeed published at Fort Kearney, Rhode Island, the prisoners at Camp Hearn launched their own unique publication, The Spiel, German for the Mirror, a name carefully chosen, though not to be confused with the later German news magazine. Copies preserved within the Army Heritage and Education Center meticulously chart its ideological evolution. Early 1943 editions were rife with predictable Nazi propaganda, but by late 1944, the paper had pivoted dramatically toward democratic discourse and intellectual debate. This transformation was no accident. Declassified documents from the Special Project Division reveal a sophisticated psychological operation designed to reshape ideological loyalty. The program categorized the prisoners into three distinct groups: the committed anti-Nazis, a small but crucial 10%, the large core of non-political prisoners, comprising 75%, and the dedicated ardent Nazis, held at 15%. Crucially, each cohort received treatment tailored to maximize ideological transformation. Anti-Nazi prisoners were identified through an exhaustive screening process, a subtle surveillance that included analysis of their letters, private conversations, and library reading choices. Developed by Army psychologists working alongside German émigré advisors, this process utilized subtle tests, documenting prisoners' reactions to news of German defeats, their book selections from libraries, their participation in educational programs, and their social interactions. These identified anti-Nazis were then elevated, granted additional privileges, and installed as barracks leaders, discussion group moderators, and newspaper editors, their influence over the non-political majority carefully cultivated and monitored. The success of this endeavor was measurable. Assistant Executive Officer Major Maxwell McKnight, whose papers are archived at the Hoover Institution, captured the positive trajectory in a November 1944 report. The transformation rate exceeds expectations, he wrote. Approximately 60% of non-political prisoners show measurable movement toward democratic ideals after 6 months of exposure to American society and targeted education. This ideological shift was powerfully reinforced by physical reality. Working in American facilities exposed the POWs to a casual, almost mocking, abundance that stood in stark contrast to the scarcity gripping the Reich. At the Alcoa aluminum plant in Rockdale, Texas, where prisoners handled war materials from September 1943 onward, workers routinely discarded more aluminum scrap in a single day than German aircraft factories could hope to acquire in a week, providing visceral evidence of the economic gulf between the warring powers. Plant records confirm that German prisoners of war were routinely assigned to scrap collection, providing them with a jarring, direct exposure to the scale of American industrial waste. Yet, it was the food processing plants that delivered the most profound psychological shock. At the Stokely Brothers Cannery in Cameron, Texas, a location verified through Milne County historical records as employing PWs from nearby Camp Hearn, men witnessed the systematic destruction of perfectly edible produce. Tomatoes slightly underripe, corn with irregular kernels, and beans with minor blemishes were all condemned and discarded, a staggering waste occurring while their civilian counterparts in Germany faced acute starvation. This dissonance was captured in a letter from P. Corporal Friedrich Muller, preserved within Red Cross archives, who wrote, "Today we destroyed hundreds of pounds of fruit because it did not meet canning standards. Fruit that would be treasure in Germany is garbage here. The American supervisor apologized to us for the waste, not understanding that he was apologizing for abundance we couldn't imagine." This exposure to overwhelming material wealth was soon followed by a demonstration of extraordinary human generosity. The Christmas of 1943 at Camp Hearn is extensively documented across local newspapers, military records, and Red Cross reports, detailing an unprecedented community mobilization. The entire town of Hearn, population barely 2,000, organized to ensure their enemy prisoners received a proper holiday celebration, a response that fundamentally contradicted typical expectations of wartime behavior. The Hearn Democrat published a comprehensive list of donations on December 23, 1943, detailing the massive effort. Local churches collected 4,800 individual gift packages, while school children contributed handmade cards and decorations. Strikingly, the American Legion Post 164, comprised of World War I veterans who had fought the Germans, donated cigarettes, candy, and sports equipment to their current enemies. The Lions Club provided musical instruments, and the Garden Club meticulously decorated the compound with holly and evergreen boughs. The camp centerpiece, a 30-foot Christmas tree photographed with newspaper, stood illuminated by electric lights that burned continuously. Quartermaster records confirm that the camp used more electricity for these decorations than many German villages utilized for all purposes combined. Such an electrical display would have been unthinkable even in peacetime Germany. To further bridge the cultural gap, local churches performed Christmas concerts in German for the prisoners, with the choir of the First Methodist Church painstakingly learning German Christmas carols phonetically. Mrs. Sarah. The performance was led by Patterson, the choir director whose own son was fighting in Italy. This profound cognitive dissonance, American mothers singing hymns of peace and goodwill to enemy soldiers, while their own children battled German forces overseas, shattered the emotional composure of several prisoners. Guard reports documented the intense psychological strain. The sheer scale of American wartime abundance was crystallized in the Christmas feast. Quartermaster records preserved a staggering menu. Roast turkey, allocated at 1 pound per man, accompanied by ham. Candied sweet potatoes, green beans, cornbread stuffing, cranberry sauce, a dessert selection of mince and apple pie ice cream, and beverages including beer for enlisted men and California wine for officers. This single meal totaled approximately 5,000 calories per person, a stark contrast to the meager 1,200 calories daily allotted to German civilians, when rations were even available. But working life in Texas exposed German prisoners of war, PSWs, to a more complex and jarring reality: American racial dynamics that simultaneously contradicted Nazi propaganda and the nation's stated ideals. At Camp Hearn, the collision of ideologies was immediate. Negro soldiers from the 359th Infantry Regiment occasionally performed guard duty. These German PSWs, steeped in the strict tenets of Nazi racial ideology, suddenly found themselves compelled to take direct orders from black Americans. Several prisoners requested transfers rather than submit to Negro authority, petitions which the camp administration firmly denied. Lieutenant Colonel Stiles addressed the issue in a December 1943 report, stating unequivocally, "German prisoner objections to Negro guards are noted and ignored." Yet, the prisoners also became unwitting witnesses to the profound contradictions of segregation. They were permitted to dine in Hearn restaurants that refused service to the very Negro soldiers guarding them, and they could occupy main sections of movie theaters where their American guards were relegated to segregated seating. The paradox was undeniable. German enemies often possessed greater social freedom in certain public contexts than the American citizens who happened to be black. This ideological certainty began to scramble completely at agricultural work sites documented in Farm Security Administration records. Prisoners worked alongside Mexican-American and Negro laborers. The sheer efficiency of these mixed-race work crews, focused on tasks rather than adherence to racial dogma, fundamentally challenged Nazi theories which equated racial purity with superior productivity. German PWs picking cotton alongside black workers were frequently outperformed, an undeniable, tangible undermining of assumptions regarding racial superiority. 3 well-documented cases illustrate the transformation of German PWs in America. Herman Bircher arrived at camp. Arriving in June 1943 as a convinced Nazi, the memoir of Johann Hearn details a gradual but profound ideological collapse, fueled by accumulated observations of American life. The critical turning point arrived during Christmas 1943, when local Hearn citizens extended extraordinary goodwill, offering gifts to enemy prisoners. Hearn recorded this seismic shift. "These people whose sons we had tried to kill gave us gifts. Their kindness wasn't weakness but strength, the confidence of victors who knew they had already won not just the war, but the peace that would follow." Hearn immigrated to the United States in 1953, achieving citizenship in 1958 before beginning a long career as an engineer for General Motors until his retirement. The impulse to assimilate was powerful, even among those who chose to flee captivity. Georg Gartner, escaping Camp Deming, New Mexico, in September 1945, lived illegally under the assumed identity of Dennis Wiles for 4 decades. Rather than returning to Germany, he chose to remain in America, marrying an American woman, raising a family, and working as a tennis instructor in California. When he finally surrendered in 1985 for a television documentary, his lifespan as an American resident exceeded his time as a German national. His autobiography, Hitler's Last Soldier in America, stands as a testament to the transformative power of American civil society. Similarly, Reinhold Pell escaped Camp Washington, Illinois, in 1945, motivated not by camp mistreatment, but by sheer boredom and a deep curiosity regarding the American way of life. Documented in his memoir, Enemies Are Human, Pell lived illegally in Chicago for 7 years, working in bookstores and marrying an American woman before voluntarily surrendering in 1953. The subsequent FBI investigation found he had violated no laws save illegal entry. Pell received citizenship in 1959 and became a successful businessman, later sponsoring other German immigrants. While the German POW experience varied across America's more than 500 camps, certain consistent patterns of engagement and education emerged. Camp Alva, Oklahoma, for instance, became a specialized center for agricultural training. Department of Agriculture records confirm that German POWs managed a 200-acre demonstration farm, learning advanced American techniques. Prisoners mastered mechanical cultivation, crop rotation, soil conservation, and the development of hybrid seeds. These highly practical skills proved invaluable upon the prisoners' return to a devastated post-war Germany. The success of Alva's agricultural program was such that local farmers, recognizing the efficiency of the trained crews, hired POW labor at premium wages, thus generating competition for prisoner manpower. Elsewhere, Camp Concordia, Kansas, achieved renown for its robust art program, offering German prisoners of. The presence of enemy prisoners left a tangible cultural legacy, evidenced by murals that still adorn the Stone County Courthouse and several local buildings today. Beyond these visual records, the camp orchestra, utilizing instruments generously donated by Kansas communities, frequently performed concerts for civilian audiences. Local press, such as the Concordia Blade newspaper, favorably reviewed these performances, often expressing surprise at the professional caliber of the enemy musicians. The artistic output generated by these prisoners of war now constitutes permanent collections within Kansas museums, offering a unique window into the wartime experience. Maintaining these standards required significant effort, especially in locations facing extreme environmental adversity. Camp Trinidad, Colorado, for instance, routinely endured harsh winter temperatures plummeting to minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Quartermaster records confirm the extensive measures taken. The Army furnished German prisoners with Arctic-grade clothing, insulated barracks, and substantially increased caloric rations, often reaching for 1,000 calories daily during the winter months. This commitment to provision was internationally recognized. Swiss Inspector André Poncho observed in February 1940 that, according to prisoners' own admissions, the German prisoners at Trinidad received better winter provisions than Wehrmacht troops on the Eastern Front. Perhaps the most profound challenge to the German military mindset, however, was the American policy of information transparency. The Special Project Division deliberately ensured that prisoners had access to a free press, recognizing that exposure to diverse and censored news sources would fundamentally undermine totalitarian ideology. Prisoners could read American newspapers that openly criticized the war effort, disclose production shortcomings, and discuss strategic failures. Recreation halls featured radio programs broadcasting commentary critical of military leadership. Comedians like Bob Hope openly mocked generals and politicians, while journalists such as Edward R. Murrow questioned official strategies. Crucially, Congress debated military appropriations publicly, with dissenting opinions broadcast nationally, all of this accessible to enemy combatants. The spectacle of the 1944 presidential election campaign, observed firsthand from within the camps, seemed to German military minds like a form of democratic suicide. President Roosevelt faced a serious wartime challenge from Thomas Dewey. Republicans openly criticized the management of the conflict. Opposition views were published without restraint, and political cartoons routinely mocked the commander-in-chief. Yet, despite this public discord, the war effort not only continued but strengthened. This demonstration that democracy derived its ultimate strength through internal debate rather than despite it, fundamentally shattered authoritarian assumptions regarding national unity. Ultimately, the International Red Cross inspection reports, which remain archived in the ICRC facilities in Geneva, consistently rated the American prisoner of war camps as exceeding the requirements of the Geneva Convention. The conditions within American prisoner of war facilities were subject to rigorous, neutral verification, providing crucial, objective assessment of compliance with international law. In his comprehensive August 1944 report, Inspector Guy Metro stated unequivocally that American camps surpassed the requirements of international treaties across all stipulated categories. Statistical evidence from facilities like Camp Hearn was illuminating. Daily caloric intake ranged from 3,300 to 3,800, significantly exceeding the 2,000 required by the Geneva Convention. Similarly, the living space allotment of 40 square feet per man far surpassed the mandated 27, and the medical staffing ratio, 1 doctor per 500 prisoners, was double the convention's required 1 per 1,000. Furthermore, Robust educational and recreational opportunities, including organized sports, libraries, and formal programs, were provided far in excess of the treaty's requirement for simply adequate recreation. Inspector Emil Sandstorm, having previously inspected POW facilities in Canada, Britain, and Australia, delivered a definitive comparative judgment, stressing that American camps offered superior material conditions driven by a profound philosophical distinction. The United States chose to treat these prisoners not merely as enemies, but as temporarily displaced persons. This approach extended beyond mere housing and into the realm of labor. Prisoners working in American factories witnessed production methods that fundamentally revolutionized their understanding of industrial efficiency. At the Lanier Steel Plant in Daingerfield, Texas, where POWs from Camp Hearn were employed between 1944 and 1945, the monthly output astonishingly exceeded the entire annual production of Germany's Ruhr Valley before Allied bombing campaigns began. The secret was not simply superior machinery, but motivation. Company records illustrate a competitive environment. Workers vied for production bonuses, suggested key efficiency improvements, and took genuine pride in their output. Charts displayed each shift's production results like competitive sports scores. Workers purchased war bonds with their overtime pay and even painted the names of bomber aircraft onto the steel they fabricated for military use. Morale, rather than strict supervision, became the primary driver of this unprecedented productivity. This efficiency was equally visible in American logistics. At Texas railroad yards, where POWs loaded critical materials, the sheer speed and coordination astounded seasoned German logistics officers. The Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad employed these prisoners at its Smithville yard, exposing them to a sophisticated logistical machine. Trains adhered precise, unforgiving schedules, loading equipment operated continuously, and nationwide coordination was maintained through seamless telegraph and telephone systems. As the German war machine finally collapsed in the spring of 1945, American authorities began preparing German prisoners of war, PSWs, for their eventual return to a devastated homeland. This preparation, meticulously documented in occupation planning records, transcended the simple logistics of repatriation. While the War Department initiated specialized efforts like Project Paperclip to secure key scientists, broader, systematic programs were simultaneously implemented to prepare these captured soldiers to rebuild a democratic German state. Courses in civil administration were designed to equip PSWs with the skills necessary for managing shattered cities, while agricultural training emphasized modern techniques crucial for feeding starving populations. Medical personnel were rigorously instructed in public health protocols aimed at epidemic prevention, and engineers received detailed study materials on infrastructure reconstruction. A dedicated special project division worked to identify and cultivate potential democratic leaders among the prisoners, providing them with additional, focused training in governance and administrative principles. The sheer scope of this re-education effort is reflected in the Provost Marshal General reports. By May 1945, the enrollment figures were staggering. 31,000 prisoners of war were engaged in vocational training. 18,000 were studying English language. 12,000 participated in agricultural programs, 8,500 in technical courses, and 6,200 were focused on business administration. Crucially, concepts underpinning the future Marshall Plan were explained to these prisoners months before the public announcement. State Department officials visited the camps, systematically explaining American intentions to rebuild rather than punish Germany. This deliberate act of incomprehensible generosity, the victor extending aid to the vanquished, served to shatter the final, corrosive remnants of Nazi ideology rooted in racial struggle and the survival of the fittest. The resulting behavioral metrics powerfully document the transformation's success. Out of 425,000 German POWs detained in America, only 2,222 escape attempts were recorded, a mere 0.52%. With just 54 successful escapes lasting more than 30 days, 0.01%. Sabotage incidents remain vanishingly low, confirmed in only 7 cases, 0.001%, and work refusal stood at 178 documented incidents, 0.04%. Conversely, voluntary labor participation surged, involving 87% of all eligible prisoners. Post-war surveys conducted by American occupation authorities confirmed the lasting impact of this strategy. 74% of returned PSWs held favorable views of American democracy. 61% supported Marshall Plan aid upon its announcement. 55% advocated for a permanent German-American alliance. And 38% expressed a desire to immigrate to the United States. The influence of the American experience extended far beyond the temporary confines of the prison camps. Immigration records meticulously document this transition, showing that approximately 5,000 former prisoners of war legally immigrated to the United States during the 1950s, often maintaining prior correspondence with American families. Their integration was remarkably successful. Naturalization records confirm that 92% of these individuals achieved citizenship within the eligible time frame. Furthermore, measured by indices such as employment stability, rates of home ownership, and negligible criminal records, their American success rate demonstrably surpassed that of the general immigrant population of the era. Equally significant was the profound effect these returned soldiers had on West German Reconstruction. Occupation records and newly accessible German archives confirm that former POWs rapidly ascended to positions of authority within the nascent democracy. A remarkable 48 individuals secured seats as members of the Bundestag, while 312 served their communities as mayors or city councilors. The practical knowledge gained in America was immediately applied across vital sectors. 1,847 former prisoners spearheaded agricultural modernization efforts. 2,341 taught in the newly reconstituted schools, and 4,165 managed businesses, implementing innovative American organizational methods. Hans-Georg von Studnitz, who transformed from a prisoner to a leading German industrialist, articulated this shift to American historians in 1965, stating, "We returned from America with more than memories. We brought knowledge of how democracy functions, how free markets operate, how diverse peoples cooperate. We had seen the future, and we knew it worked." Although Camp Hearn officially closed its gates in December 1945, the transatlantic connections proved enduring. The Hearn Heritage League meticulously maintains archives documenting the sustained transformation, holding correspondence from former POWs that spans 4 decades. Annual Christmas cards continued to arrive in Texas until the death of the last known former prisoner in 2001. Providing concrete evidence of a lasting influence rather than a mere temporary exposure. This legacy culminated in 1984, the 40th anniversary of D-Day, when 50 former Camp Hearn prisoners returned to Texas for a widely covered reunion. The Hearn Democrat reported extensively on the powerful scene as former enemies embraced their former guards. In a striking act of reconciliation, Wehrmacht veterans placed flowers at the American Legion Memorial. Speaking on behalf of the delegation, Fritz Zimmermann reflected on their journey. "We came as enemies believing in racial superiority and national destiny. We left as friends understanding that democracy's chaos is its strength, that diversity creates rather than weakens unity." The German prisoner experience in America has subsequently become a subject of intense academic scrutiny. Essential foundational texts documenting this history include Arnold Kramer's Comprehensive Nazi Prisoners of War in America, 1979, Judith Gansberg's analysis of the re-education program in Stalag, USA, 1977, Antonio Thompson's examination of POW labor programs in Men in German Uniform, 2010, and Ron Robbins' study, The Barbed Wire College, 1995. Scholarly investigations, drawing upon meticulous archival research, extensive interview documentation, and official government records, consistently affirm the profound scope and unprecedented success of this educational transformation. The historical consensus holds that the American treatment of German prisoners of war represents the most effective instance of political re-education in modern history, achieved through immersive exposure to reality rather than coercive indoctrination. The thousands of German PS who arrived on American shores between 1943 and 1946 were confronted by a society that fundamentally contradicted their totalitarian worldview. They had been conditioned to expect a decadent, weak, and racially divided nation. Instead, they discovered a society so inherently confident in its structure that it could extend genuine mercy even to its declared enemies. The conversion was not wrought by propaganda. It was achieved through the relentless accumulation of observable reality. the casual expression of freedom, the small, unexpected act of kindness, and the puzzling generosity shown by their captors. Every such instance accumulated into an ideological solvent. They witnessed democracy functioning through apparent, yet robust, chaos. They observed the undeniable progress of racial integration occurring even amidst entrenched segregation. They watched women exercising genuine authority while maintaining their cultural roles. Crucially, they experienced the simple, profound humanity that allowed enemies to become temporary friends. These unusual sights, the mundane daily life of a free society, were revolutionary to men schooled in totalitarian rigidity and accomplished what military defeat alone could not: a complete ideological surrender. The PWs did not merely witness American military power. They internalized American civic values. They did not simply observe democracy. They participated in its processes. America's greatest victory, therefore, was secured not on the battlefields, but within the confines of the prison camps where former adversaries were transformed into dedicated advocates. The sights that stunned them were unusual only to eyes trained by tyranny, but to American eyes, they were simply life, messy, imperfect, but undeniably free. This stunned observation, born of simple human interaction, inadvertently planted the foundational seeds for the post-war order, the Atlantic Alliance, the Marshall Plan, and the democratic reconstruction of Europe. Their transformation stands as powerful evidence that profound victories are achieved through demonstration, not destruction, through reality, not rhetoric, and through abiding humanity, not enduring hatred. The unusual sights German PS witnessed in America became the crucial, unexpected foundation for one of history's most successful transformations from enemy to indispensable ally.